Marketers tell stories, and mediators hear stories. And that is just the beginning of the story. Welcome to the show. This is episode number 10 of Earbud U. Look, many folks in the field of peacemaking and peace building are trying many different things to get the attention of a world that is changing rapidly all around them. When this works, it's beautiful, like with my guest today, Anastasia Pryanikova. Her and her partner have developed a startup focused on all of the most interesting parts of the mediation and storytelling experience. These are the learning parts. And she and her partner are working within a unique collaboration of artists, writers, and other creatives to help them produce their best work. Now, in many of my corporate training experiences, the most difficult conversations I have are not with people about other people. Although those are the kinds of conversations that many people want to focus on. Those are the conversations that move the meter, as the marketing boys sometimes say. However, the most impactful conversations I have are around the stories that people tell themselves. We blame, we shame, and we transfer our guilt onto other people, and then we wonder why nothing ever works out. We don't talk to other people and have outrageous expectations that they will read our minds and know what we want and magically give it to us. We wander through our days wondering, what's wrong with those people over there? When in reality, the problem most of the time lies with us. Stories get us past this kind of stuff and towards something else. We know that stories work. Heck, look at the entire history of man, from the caves to the skyscrapers and everything in between. We tell ourselves stories and then create identities that reinforce those stories. And as the cycle goes around and around, we wonder why we get into conflicts. And now, a bit of the usual stuff. You can connect with Earbud U on Twitter at earbud_U. You can also check us out on Instagram. We tweet and post images on both of those social platforms with the hashtag #BePartOfTheShow. We are part of our parent company, Human Services Consulting and Training, HSCT, based out of Endicott, New York. So check out the HSCT website at www.hsconsultingandtraining.com. Check out Anastasia Pryanikova online at www.brainalchemist.com, and check out her learning company startup, Bookphoria, at www.bookphoria.com. Now, she's got a special offer for all Earbud U listeners at the end of this interview, so I would encourage you to stay tuned for that. She's also on Facebook, so get in touch with her there at www.facebook.com/A Pryanikova. And, of course, she's on Twitter, as is most all my other guests, www.twitter.com/LAWSAGNA. Now, one last thing, and this is really something for you to know. The audio quality of this interview was interrupted by a series of annoying pops. Now, I tried to get rid of them and reduce the volume of them as much as I possibly could. Trust me, I did my darndest to get rid of them, but I couldn't get all of them. So bear with me and accept my apologies. Trust me, it's a quality conversation, in spite of the interruptions. And now, let's get into it. Hey there, everybody. Welcome to Earbud U, episode number 11. Get your knowledge on through your earbuds. Our special guest for our show today is Anastasia Pryanikova, lawyer, transmedia development expert, and an entrepreneurial thinker in the space where peace meets neuroscience. Anastasia, in partnership with Dr. Maria Costina, is co-founder of Bookphoria.com, the place where ideas come alive. From the Bookphoria.com website, I took directly this information because it was just so good. From a linguist exploring the language of advertising, to a corporate lawyer working internationally, to a U.S. Small Business Administration attorney advisor counseling small business leaders, Anastasia has been in the business of changing people's minds to facilitate high-stake conversations and decisions across borders, cultures, and industries. That's such a great opening, I had to use it to open up our Earbud U episode. This is all amazing stuff, and Anastasia will help us get through it all and suss it all. Welcome to Earbud U, Anastasia.
Thank you so much, Jesan. I am so excited and thrilled to be here with all of you, Earbud U listeners.
Great. So let's start off with our first question here. Why don't you tell our listeners what it is that you do exactly?
As part of Bookphoria project, we convert nonfiction books and any expert content really into multimedia online courses and various online information products. And we help authors, speakers, and experts build brands that are both in demand and on demand. And what I mean by that is people not only want your information, they want to learn from you, but they can access you 24/7, just like on-demand TV. When they need it, when they have time, they can go to your website, they can go to your course platform, and they can learn from you. So what we believe in Book4 is that learning needs to be fun. It needs to be relevant to our lives, to our challenges in work and in personal lives maybe, and they need to fit into our busy schedule, busy lifestyle. So our mission at Book4 is not just convey information. We have too much information out there. There is a lot, but really transform lives. So there is plenty of information, but wisdom and mastery are still rare, and we're really hoping to help people build that new skills, that mastery, and that wisdom through the work of our clients, through their expertise. So that's what we do at Book4.
Excellent. That sounds really awesome. I loved it how you talked about wisdom and mastery, and how making learning fun and relevant and making it really fit into people's schedules was really something that you were pursuing with Bookforia.
Correct, because let's be honest, our attention spans are getting shorter. We have less time to just sit down and, let's say, watch an hour-long video in front of the computer when somebody is talking to us, or maybe read a long PDF handout. That's not how we learn. Lots of learning happens socially. When we have a question, we go to the person who may know the answer, or we look up things on YouTube when we get that brief piece of information, maybe a brief video that answers our question. That's how a lot of learning needs to happen right now. And that's what we try to do in Book4 and make learning interactive so that when clients have a challenge, they know where to go and how to package information in most compelling way, what I like to call brain captivating way.
Excellent. So talk to me about this brain captivation. You have a background in linguistics and a very strong understanding and a very strong background in neuroscience. What began your interest in sort of, as Steven Pinker would call the stuff of thought, and what keeps you going in that field other than just working with Bookforia?
Well, I've worn many hats, so to start my career, and I really started off in linguistics. That was my first passion, and it still is. I love languages, and part of it was the focus in psycholinguistics and in ESL, which is teaching English as a second language. So I started off as an instructor of foreign languages and also that person who was really interested in how our language and mind work together, how we think, how we develop. Actually, one of my first research projects when I was doing my master's degree in linguistics was to look at the language of advertising and see how that language reflected various values that people have about the products. So it was always in the back of my mind how we kind of think, how our thoughts are translated into action. And then it was a long time ago, and at that time there was not a whole lot of information about the brain, just because we did not have the technology that would allow us to peek into the brain, live brains. Right now we have fMRIs that can approximate the activation. We can look into the brain, we can see how the blood flow goes through the brain, and we can say, oh, okay, this network is activated when we do this, and that network is active when we do that. But back in those days, we didn't really have that capacity. But I remember attending one of the early seminars on the brain, and they were talking about this amazing effect that when somebody, let's say, had an injury to the brain or a lesion, and that part of the brain was responsible for a certain function, later on, the brain was able to reorganize itself and to compensate for the deficiency in one part, essentially moving the function of that part into the other part of the brain. And that totally fascinated me, that capacity for what we now know as neuroplasticity, is that our brains don't just stay the same throughout our lives. we used to think that we just born with a certain number of neurons and they just die off and that's it. But now we say that no, that's not true anymore. And in fact, our brains constantly develop. We produce new neurons, and if we use those new neurons to connect to new information, new skills, new techniques, we are actually becoming those lifelong learners and keep our brains neuroplastic. So that's really where it all started, and that's what kind of fuels my passion, because there's a lot of new research about the brain that is coming out just about every week right now, and I'm tracking a lot of studies, and I'm trying to see how they can apply to the field of learning and education and training, and how I can make our Bacforia products better for that. So that's my passion in the brain side of it.
Awesome. Well, this is one of my fields or my areas of interest as well, because coming out of a background in conflict resolution and reconciliation, looking at the patterns of people in conflict and how people continue to sort of maintain the same patterns that they've established over time, and they struggle so much with breaking out of those platforms and breaking out of those patterns. I did a workshop actually this weekend with a group of individuals, and when I started talking about neuroplasticity, and I didn't really go into it obviously at the depth that you have or even the understanding that I have, I just went into it at a surface level with them. They were very surprised that the brain continues to grow and that they're capable of learning. And the crowd, that was at the workshop was a little bit older, and so they weren't as convinced maybe as you and I are, but that the word that you use there is if people are willing to learn. I love that. Where does that motivation for learning, where's that located in the brain? Have you found that yet?
Well, I don't know if we could pinpoint just one part of the brain. What we know right now is usually there are a lot of usual networks and pathways that work together. But what we do know is that feel-good neurotransmitter called dopamine is probably quite implicated in our internal motivation to learn new things. Now, dopamine is the neurotransmitter that is released when we usually experience some kind of a pleasure, be it food or some beautiful scenery, or we engage in something that's really exciting. Our body, our brain triggers the release of dopamine. But what we also know is that when we get some rewards for doing something right, let's say we try to learn something and it may not work for a while, and then we get it right. That moment when we get the reward, we also get the shot of dopamine. And usually that's what keeps us motivating to continue on and learn and do more of it. So it's important to start and kind of fuel yourself with something that brings you pleasure and brings you that sense of accomplishment, that sense of reward, because it will help you grow from it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, that shot of dopamine that we get, isn't that the same chemical that's released when we see something positive in our Facebook feeds, or on the negative end, maybe when we use illegal drugs like heroin?
Yeah.
Isn't that the same chemical?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's the same chemical, and it can be used for the force of good or evil. You're right. And when we talk about addiction, that's where that dopamine levels also are implicated. So yes, it's a complex. Anything in the brain is complex, and there's no easy answer to it. But you're absolutely right. You can be hooked on those likes on Facebook, and it's the same process that keeps you actually learning and reading through a textbook.
Well, you talk about wisdom and mastery. One of the things that I sometimes talk about with people is, particularly again in conflict resolution, when I'm talking about attaining these skills like of active listening and of emotional intelligence and empathy. When I talk about it, the first response that I typically get with a group or with individuals is, "Wow, that all seems to be so simple. It should be easy, right?" And I say, yes, it is simple, but it's not easy. And if it were easy, I probably wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here helping you out with it. So how do we get to the wisdom piece? Like, how does that develop in the brain? How do we? And I'm going to get back to Bacforia here in a minute, but I want to chase this rabbit a little bit further. How do we get to wisdom and to mastery, which you were talking about through the learning process on your platform?
Well, I think there are many different pieces to it, but in part it all starts with awareness, because unless we become aware of something, we cannot really change it. We cannot really build on it. And one of the features of our brains is that our brains like to automate things. And when we repeat the same behavior over and over again, after a while it becomes automatic. We no longer think about it. And it's a good thing, because we don't have to think about how to open a door in the morning or how to drink a cup of coffee. But when it comes to behaviors such as your behavior in a conflict situation, for example, the responses to a certain trigger, that's when it becomes a problem, because oftentimes we are sent on those default patterns of behavior, and we may not like them, and they may not be productive. So the first step in changing those patterns is really to say, okay, I recognize that that's happening. I don't know why. I may not know how I developed it, but I'm noticing that maybe I'm getting defensive when this happens, or I am getting aggressive when somebody kind of criticizes me. So awareness is really the cornerstone of any change. And then we start looking at, okay, what do we want to develop instead, and how we do it. So if we look at habits as communication habits, we have to look for better ways to deal with our familiar situations. What would we want to be our defaults instead of that unproductive kind of maybe fight or flight response? And identifying the desired behavior would be the next step. And then the big part of it is practice, practice, and practice. I wish I could give you kind of a magic pill and take it, and then tomorrow you're going to be a proficient, efficient conflict resolver in every situation.
Hey, don't come up with that pill. I'll be out of a job if they come up with that pill. I'll be out of that job. I need work.
Not to worry about it too much yet. So unfortunately, a lot of real learning happens when we start practicing those skills in real situations. And before we get to real situations, what we do in Docforia, which I think is pretty cool, we try to simulate those real situations, but we make it safe for people, so that the consequences of maybe unproductive behavior are not that grave as they may be in a workplace or in personal life. So we kind of try to train people through simulations and scenarios to develop those skills that they will need and they will hopefully remember when they happen to be in real life situations.
Great. That's amazing stuff. When I talk with folks, again, talk a lot about storytelling and how that works with brainwave patterns. So you talk about safe simulation, and you talk about awareness, particularly self-awareness. How does that combine with the storytelling mechanism that allows people to bond through the release of oxytocin in addition to the dopamine? How does all that factor in to learning?
Well, stories are really fascinating, and what we're learning right now is that stories have this capacity to really synchronize the brains of, let's say, the storyteller and the listener. And of course, we all know intuitively the importance of stories in our lives, because that's how we transfer wisdom from generations to generations. That's how people kind of have evolved to communicate. A lot of important cultural, social information is transmitted through stories, and that's been going on since the time we were sitting around, campfires. And it turns out that our brain has evolved to be really attuned to stories. That's how our brain kind of analyzes and perceives the world around. We all convert that information and maybe different pieces and bits of it into a story based on our system of beliefs, based on our experiences. And what recent studies show is that if the story resonates with the listener, the brains of the listener and the storyteller show similar patterns of activation, which means like people are really synchronized in their understanding. There's also interesting research by neuroscientist Paul Zak into specifically the, you mentioned oxytocin. And what he found is that when the story grabs somebody's attention and sustains that attention. And if the story transports people into the world of the characters of that story, that's where we see the release of oxytocin. And what's interesting about oxytocin is that in the group situation, it oftentimes promotes that sense of empathy within the group, and also it can help people cooperate. Now, there are different kind of sides to oxytocin. There are some certain dark sides to it as well, but for the purpose of the story, it seems that stories are very powerful neuro kind of modulating mechanism to bring people together. And so when we listen to the story, we can build that empathy muscle, so to speak, by resonating with the characters, by thinking about the plot of the story, by putting ourselves into the shoes of the protagonist in a story. So books and stories are a great vehicle to learn and to practice emotional regulation, emotional responses, and hopefully, again, the experience that we develop through storytelling can be applied to real-life situations later on.
Absolutely. Well, you talk about your background, about how you wrote your master's thesis on how language of advertising affects thoughts, and marketers know this, right? And marketers, advertisers, and sales folks know about the power of stories. No one tries to sell you a vacuum by talking about the features of the vacuum.
Right.
They try to sell you the vacuum talking about how great you're going to feel in your house once the floor is vacuumed, and how wonderful the floor is going to look when the people come over, or when your guests come over and they look at your floor and they say, "Oh, Anastasia, it looks as though you used the Bissell vacuum to vacuum this floor." And Anastasia then goes to the closet and opens up the closet and says, "Yes, it's this Bissell vacuum here that I got for $149.99. Like, marketers and advertisers know how the power of story works for those triggers, right?
They better, yes, if they want to make a sale.
Exactly. And so one of the things that fascinates me around social media, and you talk about oxytocin and feeling connected to characters, is on social, where particularly, let's use Facebook as the biggest example, just because it's just the biggest example. On Facebook, I connect with this person here because maybe potentially I'm already bonded with them in real life, or maybe potentially I'm not, but there's already a bond there, so there's already that flow of chemicals. Then I see all of their images and all of their story in my news feed over and over and over again. Now I got to chase that click. Now I got to connect more with them. And so it operates at that brain level very, very, very cleverly. And that's why one of the areas that I sometimes focus on with my clients is cyberbullying. And this is becoming even more of an issue in the workplace, where now we've got the bullying mechanisms and the dark side of those connections really coming in to impact how people either bond or don't bond, or the bad actors coming in, which have always existed, by the way, but the bad actors coming in and causing conflict and sort of disrupting that connection.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, this is a fascinating little piece, but let's switch gears a little bit and talk about sort of the process of developing your book for entrepreneurial project, because Anastasia, I don't know if you know, but you're an entrepreneur, and how have you? I don't know if you're aware of that or not, but
I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, maybe, kind of. So, talk about how the nuts and bolts of the entrepreneurial journey to Bookphoria. I'm always fascinated with entrepreneurs. I always want to find out sort of what their journey was like, and how did that, maybe not step by step, but sort of how did you go from bang, that's the idea, I can see it, to yes, now it has blossomed out into the world. What was that entrepreneurial journey like?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I kind of transformed into entrepreneur from a lawyer, and it's not the usual path, because I think lawyers may have a lot of kind of qualities that actually, or training rather, that may preclude them from becoming entrepreneurs, but we can talk about it later. But what I did is actually, after I practiced law for a while, I went more towards training and development, and I still worked within the legal field and alternative dispute resolution, and I decided to combine my passion for neuroscience and communication and conflict management by offering programs on the application of the brain research to communication and to conflict management. So that's how I started off, and I was doing live trainings for a while, and then one day I was talking to a good friend of mine who is an expert in distance learning, and that's Dr. Marina Kostena. And she traveled the world from South Africa to Vietnam to Dominican Republic, developing curriculum and really setting up distance learning programs in the areas where, for example, children could not get access to good traditional live education, but they could use the mobile phones to tap into distance learning classes. So as we explored this possibility of kind of getting together and doing something together, we catch this idea of building a learning system that could really connect individual experts with those who want to learn from those experts in a fun, interactive, and engaging way. In other words, we wanted to bring that distance learning technology to individual consultants, book authors, and experts, because we realize that there's a lot of knowledge out there, but the ways of transferring that knowledge are still not optimal. But what's interesting about it is that Bookforia probably could not have existed 5 years ago just because technology was not there. Technology was still very expensive. And only if you were like a large university, let's say, or a big corporation, you could afford to create a big learning management system and train your employees. But that's no longer the case. Right now, we have some great technology out there that allows us to build really interactive, interesting courses and games and offer them to small business owners, to experts, speakers, practitioners, and allow them to step in those roles of teachers and educators. And they don't have to know the technology. That's the best part of Bookforia. We don't try to teach them how to use technology. We do that for them. Instead, we produce the whole multimedia course for them. So that's really how the idea became kind of a reality. And the market is good right now because we know that people do learn online more and more. And there is also savings in terms of cost of travel if you host, let's say, an online course versus a live conference. And it's very efficient for both individual practitioners and experts and their clients because it can be done anywhere. You could have clients nationally, you could have clients internationally, and they can tap into your platform and they can learn from you 24/7, again, in demand and on demand, and we can support it. So that's really how Bookforia started. And then it's a project that involves multiple people. We have graphic designers, we have voiceover artists, we have developers, and we bring teams together based on the needs of the project. That's another thing that is happening right now that probably was not that popular back 5 or 10 years, 10 years ago. But now we can tap into the talent really worldwide if we need to. And we can bring some individuals on board depending on their skill sets and what our clients want. And we really like it because we've been able to connect with some great talent out there. And we're kind of helping each other to grow and build our brands that way.
Now, you talked about your partner, Dr. Maria Kostina.
Yeah.
Kostina, yeah. And so I've been doing a lot of research into high-tech startup founders and sort of how they either get along or don't get along, and what that process looks like around conflict and around communication. You know, you may have, and the sort of the stereotype that I give, and you know, it's not a great stereotype, but it is a stereotype, is, you know, you may have two individuals who are really, really awesome at coding together, but may not necessarily be really, really awesome at business together. And one of the things that a venture capitalist looks at before investing in a high-tech startup is how well do the founders get along? How do they complement each other? What does that process look like? Because the majority of startups that fail, it's because the founders can't agree on either the direction of the startup or the direction of the business, or how to move from being just an entrepreneurial sort of moving fast and breaking things, to paraphrase from Facebook, to moving towards an established business that employs people and that's solid and has stability. So talk to me about your partnership with Dr. Kostina. How is that working, and what does that look like, and how did you pick her? Like, how did you two sort of pick each other?
Well, it's interesting because we've been friends for a very long time. In fact, we used to study at the same linguistics department many, many years ago, and we used to go Latin dancing together because we were in the same Latin dance group. So we had a lot in common, but it was social and educational. But I've known Dr. Maureen Costin for quite a while, and for the longest time, we never had any kind of really work-related interactions. And then I think a couple years ago, we just started, our fields of interest kind of intersected because we were both interested in education, we were both in training, especially when I moved into live training and development. We were both on social media very actively, and we started doing kind of small projects initially together to see how we can do those. And we produced a social media course at one point. We did mutual trainings. We did some webinars together. So it kind of started little by little. And then after a while, we just understood that our skill sets were really complementary in developing Bookforia. We are, as much as we are friends, I think we have very different skill sets as business partners. And that works really great for us because I know what I'm good at, Dr. Maureen Costin knows what she's good at, and we complement each other. And I think that makes our life much easier.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's a transition, right? Because I mean, talk a little bit about eStudio LLC. Sort of was that just you by yourself, or were you involved with partners there, or how did that work?
No, that was actually me by myself. It was just
Okay.
me. I would, work with 4 people. I would be hired to deliver trainings, but it was my company. I had some subcontractors once in a while and administrative assistants and like that, but I did not have employees. It was just myself.
Right. And so that's one of the things that I blog about. I'm doing an entire blog series right now about sort of the things that a consultant needs to think about as they sort of make their way transitioning from, in essence, a freelancer to a consultant to a business owner, all the while maintaining that entrepreneurial title. And it's a tough transition to go from being by myself, I make all the decisions. If I want to go, I go. If I don't, I don't, to now I got to talk to this other person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I got to take that other person into consideration because not only is it, in your case, with Dr. Kostina, not only is it maybe our financial relationship that might be on the line, but it's also our personal relationship that might be on the line here.
Yes, I think that's very true, and I think that it's important for anybody who are friends and go into business is that there is a danger to that, and you have to be really comfortable and you have to trust the person. And I think trust and respect are big words here when it comes to business relationships because you have to be able to trust the judgment in certain areas and you have to be comfortable delegating to that person in the areas that you trust them. And I think that's where sort of that mutual respect comes in, that we can be good at certain things, we may be not so good at others, and we need to supplement ourselves to the extent that it can help the business so that we have this big picture as to where we need to go and who we need to hire or who we need to consult in order to move forward. And just a recent example, we're at a point of transition in the company where we really want to scale up. And we understand that we cannot do that ourselves. So we have to work in business less, and we have to step back and work on business. And so that's part of our transition right now is to be able to outsource some of the parts of the work to different organizations to help us with the e-commerce side of the program and really allow us to scale up and be able to handle more projects and larger projects. So it's a very interesting process, like you said, to building a solo business to moving towards more of a partnership and then really scaling the company. It's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you talk about scaling, right? And that's that's the thing that is typically the first question of any business mentor or business advisor, or if you're a high-tech startup in the case of a VC, how are you going to scale this? How are you going to scale this? How is this going to scale? Because, it's great to have something that's really small and niche, but you've got to get more people in to justify, your cost drivers, and to get more revenue so that your cost drivers are pushed in a particular direction and to close more sales. And so this loop and this cycle can continue to go around and around and around.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So, it sounds very exciting. And I'm really excited about where Bookphoria is going. But, talk a little bit about this place where, you bring a team together, because you said you work with a collection of, folks, graphic designers and voiceover artists.
Mm-hmm.
How do you put that team together? Is that on a project-by-project basis, or do you have like an entire stable out in the back, or you're just like, hey, yeah, you come on out, we're gonna bring you on for this project, or how does that happen?
We do have people that we respect and trust in their own fields. So we have vetted a number of professionals who are freelancers, in essence, and whenever the project comes up, our first conversation is really assessing the needs. What do we need to make this project happen? And we also go into more subjective things as to what kind of design this person likes, who may be best suited to do graphic design work, for example, for that project. So there's an art and science to it, but we are, again, part of the scaling process is putting it into a system, our Bookphoria system, that allows us to pick the right team, because ultimately picking the right team would really enhance the quality of the product and ensure that the product meets the expectations of the client. So if the client says we want 2 minutes of animation, to us it's a sign, okay, we have to bring the voiceover person, we need to have someone who would write the script, we need someone who would do the animation. So it is project by project, but it's also a process of vetting people and getting in touch with the talent and knowing the talent and their strengths and weaknesses so that we can put them on the right project so they can really work towards their strengths and help our clients build really great businesses.
Awesome. Well, obviously with this process of finding the right person and putting them on the right team so that they can help the client out, you're going to run into conflicts. And you and I both have a background in alternative dispute resolution and conflict resolution. And the feedback that I always get when I work with groups, as a solopreneur now, but as I work with groups is, hey, how successful is this stuff in your life when you do this? And I always tell them, well, I get about 75% of it wrong, and then the 25% of it, I'm sometimes kind of on the ball, sort of close to the target. The difference between my 75% and your 75%, and it's the same percentages for both of us here in this room right now when I'm doing this workshop. The difference between my 75% and your 75% is I'm aware that I'm screwing up. I'm absolutely aware. One part of my brain, and I break it down to the left to right brain kind of thing. The left part of my brain tells me, hey, son, you're screwing up here, and these are the things you do here, 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 and the right brain's just going and is gibberish. Like it's just going, it's ready to go, And I know it's not left brain and right brain, but that's sort of the analogy that I use with groups, and everybody laughs, and then it makes everything just, relaxed and really awesome moving forward, because I have that awareness piece. But talk with us about sort of the conflicts that may sometimes arise, in building these teams, and how do you and how does Dr. Kostina, how do you two together sort of resolve these with not only with your clients but also with the teams that you're building?
It's a great question, because one of the issues that we are having is that our teams are virtual. So we're not in the same building where you can walk into somebody's office and you can talk to them face to face and you can resolve a lot of issues, because I think generally that's the more preferred way of communicating if you have a chance, is to do it face to face, as much as we like technology. But we work with teams that sometimes are across, somebody may be in New York, the other person is in California, and the other person may be in the Philippines, who knows? So part of it is really have a technology that enables good project management. And this is part of it we're still learning, but we've realized that it's quite impossible to just go through emails all the time. But there are platforms out there that enable teams come together virtually and work virtually and talk to each other virtually consistently, continuously. And it enables productivity. And so that was actually a big part of it, is where we could see the technology that can help us set the deadlines, set the expectations, the to-do list, who is responsible for what, when it needs to be done, and how we can handle and channel those discussions. So I'm a big believer in systems when it comes to running the business, and we are finding that having that system is really important, because then we can be clear as to who is responsible for what piece of the project, what is expected of them, and we can come back and immediately ask where we are with that project. So I think part of that conflict management is really ensuring that the systems are working for your virtual teams to accommodate for our different issues that may come up. So if somebody has a question or challenge, they know where to go and how to ask it, as opposed to just sending an email to 10 different people or sending an email to one person who happens to be out of their office and can't the email till next week. So I think the systems are important. And then the other part of it is really knowing your people, getting to know your people, because what we realized also is that we have some great talented individuals, but we feel like they need a little more time maybe to work out the great graphic design. And when we do the project, we kind of built in that time for them. Somebody else may be really responsive in communicating, but may have some other challenges. And so part of it is knowing your people and making sure that you can accommodate different individual styles of work and make everybody kind of work together towards the common goal and understand that common goal. And also be direct. If issues do come up, I think it's important to be direct and to communicate the expectations very clearly. And it's especially important in the virtual world where there's a lot of ambiguity through emails. And sometimes we deal with people whose language may not be even, English may not be their first language. So we have to, I mean, both of us happen to be instructors of foreign languages, so we kind of understand what we're dealing with. But like that extra challenge too, depending on who we work with.
Well, this is great stuff, and this is fascinating stuff. I could talk with you all day about this, but I know you do not live on the bread of Bookphoria alone. You know, you're not just doing that one thing in your life. So, you know, what do you do to shake the cobwebs off? What do you do for fun when you just have to put it down for, you know, an hour or for 6 hours or for 8 hours, which is probably the most time you probably put it down for. But what do you do when you put it down and you're like, you know what, I'm out. I'm going to go do this thing. What do you do for fun?
Well, for fun, interestingly, I love cooking, actually, and cooking kind of relaxes me. It's one of those activities I can do every day. I should be doing every day.
Ooh, cooking at Anastasia's house. All right, I'm writing that down.
I do like it, and you know, it's one of those things that I'm interested in food. I'm sort of interested in how food grows and how we get it, and I'm sort of health conscious, and I read quite a bit about it. And I also enjoy, really, it's a sort of a multi-sensory brain experience for me, because here you have the smells and the colors of the food, and it's really a nice, relaxing process. And I try to get my soon-to-be 9-year-old daughter to help me out and kind of get her indoctrinated into this kind of quality food cooking so that she eats better. So that's one of the things I like to do. I also like to do some different sports. I'm not so much into just traditional go to the gym to work out, although I do some of that too. I like figure skating. My daughter started figure skating a couple years ago, and instead of kind of waiting for her while she was at the rink, I decided I would sign up for adult figure skating classes.
Oh, wow.
Plus, I grew up in Russia, in Moscow, Russia, and figure skating is really big there, so it's a big winter sport. So I kind of started doing it as a child, but now as an adult, I continue doing it. I really enjoy it. That's another way to kind of keep my brain-body coordination going.
Well, and it releases all those chemicals, and then there's 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 oxytocin and dopamine and a bunch of other chemicals that are released,
and it's fun.
And it's fun,
It's fun. I do self-defense, Krav Maga. That's a very different type of sport, but I do enjoy it as well. And I think that's kind of much more about sort of mental toughness and resilience that you build, kind of the overcoming, the stretching yourself out of your comfort zone. That's where that comes in. And I actually really enjoy that for that too. It puts a different perspective on my skill set. So.
Well, you know what? Hey, as the marketer Seth Godin talks about, you're going to hit a dip, right? I mean, every project that you're building at a certain point, you're going to hit the dip. And how do you persevere and go through that? And a lot of entrepreneurs, not a lot of entrepreneurs, all the folks that I've talked to here in the Earbud U studios this year have all had an entrepreneurial basis somewhere underneath them. But even underneath that, they've all been involved in some physical exercise or some physical activity. A lot of them, the martial arts, a lot of them, whether it's karate or Krav Maga or something like that, something where they can get physical and sort of get out of their own heads or they have a background in that and, get out of their own heads and use that, like you said, that mental toughness to sort of persevere and drive through the dip when it happens, when they're building something in these new virtual spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. I truly believe that our skills are not only developed just like in the workplace, but any hobby can be a skill builder and you can learn from it. And if you think about that, we started talking about awareness. If you think about what you can take out from the experience, be it, cooking, figure skating, or Krav Maga, you can still find something that will be applicable to your business and to your life. So I'm very much into that cross-pollinating from different fields and learning from all of it.
Great. Well, it sounds as though you're fabulous at just about everything. It sounds as though you're doing great. It sounds as though you're hitting, 99% or 100% on all cylinders. It sounds like it's great. But is there anything where you're like, that's not something I'm good at. I'm going to tick that off. I'm going to try to move that off of the plate. Is there anything you're absolutely terrible at?
On the plate, you'll think that I'm really terrible at, I'm sure. Fortunately, I probably haven't tried them all yet.
Well, I'm a big believer in just humility in general for folks. It's you've got to know what you're good at. You got to know you got to know which battles you can win and which battles you can't.
Yeah, that is true. Well, like I said, there are many things. Navigation would be one of them. I'm never quite sure where I am, so I get lost really easily. That's probably part of the why I like systems, is that they keep me in check as to where I am, what needs to happen next, because otherwise I'm much more of that holistic kind of like go with the flow type of person. I get my creativity on and I forget the world. I'm sort of becoming that absent-minded professor. So I know where I need to keep myself in check, to keep moving and to keep myself on target, and that's why I like systems. And that's why I also like people who do the administrative stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, hey, you doing those little tiny things. Again, it's the process of entrepreneurship is about moving things off of your plate, right? So that you can move faster in order to continue to break the model, whatever that model is that you're in the process of breaking. So. Yeah,
absolutely. I think you can always you need to get the skills that are not your strengths. You can get somebody else who knows better.
Exactly. Well, you know what that whole idea of strength-based leadership, where you sort of combine everybody's strengths together, and that makes the whole work a lot more smoothly. Yeah, absolutely. Well, great. Well, I've had a great conversation with you, Anastasia. I would love to talk with you more, but we've got to wrap up. Why don't you tell me what you would like to promote today, if anything? What would you like to tell our listeners about?
I would like to invite our listeners to visit our website, which is bookphoria.com. It's BOOKPHORIA.com, bookphoria.com. And there you can see the way you can sign up for our one-on-one consultation with myself or Dr. Maria Kostina. And that's our way to really explore how the world of learning and multimedia can help you grow your business. And if you mention that you are listeners for this podcast, we will have something special for you during that consultation. But first, we're going to encourage you to just talk to us about your needs. Maybe you have a book out there and you're not quite sure how you can move it to the next level, and maybe you can put that book into more of a practical scenario-based learning or a game or an animation. We can really help you do that. Or maybe you have some expert content that you want to turn into a passive income stream, because that's really what we're looking to help our clients with, is to package their expertise in a fun, engaging way and make money on it. Try to help you build your information business in a way that is more engaging and fun for your customers and clients. So come over and talk to us. That's the first step in our process to really get you started in this whole new world of multimedia. And what's a little nice surprise for your brains once you just tell us that you come through your podcast.
Absolutely great. So a free gift or some kind of gift anyway for all the listeners to Earbud U. Well, I'd love to thank you for being here, Anastasia. I really had a great time talking with you, and I look forward to all of our listeners heading over to bookforia.com and checking out Anastasia and what she's got going on there, and really looking more into her business as a way to help your clients, well, learn better, quite frankly. Thank you very much for coming onto our podcast, Anastasia.
Thank you so much, Jesan. It was my pleasure, and best of luck to all of your listeners. I had a great time. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, to hear more from Earbud U, please follow us on Twitter. We're on Twitter, as we usually are, at Earbud_U. We're also on Instagram. We put out live photos and live tweets of the show. We're underneath the hashtag #BePartOfTheShow. We're part of our parent company, Human Services Consulting and Training, based out of Endicott, New York. So check out our website and our blog at www.hsconsultingandtraining.com. Thanks again to Anastasia Pryanikova of bookforia.com, and thank you again for listening to Earbud U. Have a great day.